Hello and welcome to this feature match area here at the GP in Prague. And we can see on the left of our screen there, that is Paulo Vitor Damadorosa, Hall of Famer, Pro Tour champion, and kicking things off with an invention. We already have Martin Zimmerman checking out what's going on here.
It's actually a steel oversteer. So Pro Tour champion, Hall of Famer, and a luck sack. Paulo Vitor Damadorosa kicking it off with a steel oversteer there.
And in red-blue, there are a lot of artifact creatures. We can see already World-Class Monitor coming down, immediately getting +1/+1 counter along with the Steel Overseer. If you had to pick an invention to open, Steel Overseer, one of the premium ones in this format, Placata Pillarbug coming from Martin Zimmerman there. Currently a mono-black deck, though we have to assume that there must be some more Colours of Mana coming from him soon enough.
Yeah, I was watching Paulo build his deck, and the first thing he did is took all his good blue cards and artifacts and just put them together, and then he spent most of his time trying to figure out what his second color is going to be. So, and he chose red, and it's always good, color of removal, and it gives you that nice bonus with the Well-Fast Monitor.
I mean, also, this is the color of Improvise. These two are probably the colors that use Improvise the most, and at the moment, all that Paulo Vitor Damadorosa has going on is artifact creatures. The Well-Fast Monitor attacking, the Steel Overseer, quite happy to just put in points of damage by activating each and every turn.
Yeah, he had an interesting decision. He could have played the Windkind Raiders now in his hand, but he would have to tap both his artifacts to improvise it out. And I think just putting more counters on your creatures is a better move. It lets him put through more damage. And Martin Zimmerman just adding Mobile Garrison to the board. But he does have a Prey Upon. Does he? Oh.
Revolutionary Rebuff there. That
Nice.
enough to deal with the removal spell. And a very important bit of counter magic there.
Mm.
We can see the Windkind Raiders that we may have coming down into play soon enough. For now, though, is there going to be a point where Paulo Vitor Damadorosa wants to just attack with that Steel Overseer?
Probably not the Steel Overseer now, but he has that Well-Fast Monitor, and now he has to decide. I think he still had land, and we don't quite see what he has in his hand. But I expect Martin Zimmerman to start putting up some pressure now that he drew the green land here in the forest. So I see a couple of green cards in his hand. So I'm wondering what he will come up with, because a removal spell for either of the artifacts will be pretty key here.
Absolutely. I mean, that was the first target for Revolutionary Rebuff. It can only counter non-artifact spells, and as much as we're rhapsodizing about Paulo's ability to play artifacts, Martin Zimmerman has been all over the artifacts early game too.
Yeah, and honestly, like 2-mana counterspells are not really expected. Even the 4-mana counterspells in this form, like Dismal Failure and so on, they're not that great. Even in Seal deck. Okay, interesting. So now he went for the Windkind Raiders because he spent an extra turn developing his mana, went up to 5 lands, and now being able to get the Raiders for 5 mana and an artifact creature seemed much more profitable, because Paulo could still attack with a big Well-Fast Monitor, and the additional +1/+1 counter wasn't as important as it was the previous turn. And having that Revolutionary Rebuff actually made the decision even more clear.
Well, I mean, he's presenting 10 damage next turn, right?
Yeah, exactly.
He can activate the World-Fast Monitor to give it Menace, meaning that at least at present, Martin Zimmerman wouldn't be able to block. He can activate Steel Overseer in order to turn the 5/4 into a 6/5 and then 4 in the air.
Yeah. Presenting lethal is definitely nice, and I think Martin Zimmerman is realizing it. I saw a thriving Rhino in his hand. It's just a good creature and fine blocker, but I wonder what his black cards are. I think it was a 4th Bridge Prowler that I saw in his hand as well, which I don't think does much in this spot. But I don't see his other black cards. But he looks just by the hand motions, you can see he's not very confident. And I think Paulo is so experienced that he can read this as well.
And I guess that you always have the thinking when you find yourself in round 4 at a GP playing a Hall of Famer of, well, maybe they just don't have a very good deck and they're coming off their buys but don't have good cards. Yeheni coming down here, able to crew up. So Martin Zimmerman looks like he's going for some attacks here. Immediately untaps Yeheni. Undying Partisan there. We see Haste 2/2, and if Paulo's creatures die, it will get bigger.
Yeah, I mean, that was... So, Yeheni crewed the Mobile Garrison, and then when Martin attacked with the Mobile Garrison, he untapped Yeheni. I mean, at least this gives... it doesn't really give him a blocker because of the Menace from Paulo.
Yeah, I think that we have seen some lifelink already going on, though, so Zimmerman not going to die on the face of things on the attacks back.
Yeah, but he won't have many profitable blocks either. I mean, of course, he can block with the Yeheni, sacrifice his pillar bug to give it indestructible, so that it can block maybe the overseer if it attacks. But I don't think that's likely, and I don't think he's gonna play a 1-mana creature. Maybe if he has swamp, he can play 4-bit prowler, but even that is not great. No.
Well, that's the first damage that Paulo Vitor Damadoreso has taken this tournament. He has had, of course, had 3 buys, so this is his first round, his very first game. But untapped in a commanding position here. Zimmerman, not a lot of good blocking going on. What's the spell from Paulo Vitor Damadoreso?
Malfunction, clearing the way for a lethal attack here. Looks that way. Martin, he wants to see the win. Wants to see Paulo attack with everything.
And there we have it.
Yeah. All right. I like that Martin Zimmerman decided to play until the last moment. I'm a very strong proponent of this approach. You can see Paulo just overpowering his opponent here with that Steel Overseer. I mean, getting a masterpiece is very hard in this format, but even putting it into such good use early, it's good to see.
Yeah, a very straightforward game 1 for Paulo Vitor Damadoreso. I'm sure he'd be quite happy to have a few more of those this tournament. A lot of rounds left in GP Prague. I mean, this is basically his first round of the tournament, but we will see plenty more from him, I'm sure. Of course, indeed, games 2 and 3. And now we get to see another Pro Tour champion, Antonio Del Moral Leon, on the right-hand side of our screen from Spain. He's up against Hannes Karem, and this looks like a bit of a grudge match that we've got going on here. 3 colors, at least, from Antonio Del Moral Leon. He's got that unbridled growth on his forest, so he might have more mana available to him. Meanwhile, green-black, a color combination I think we might see quite a bit of this weekend from Hannes Karem.
Oh yeah, tell me about it. I was looking at the decks from a lot of pros in this room, and like most of them were green-black, and it's understandable. But green offers you nice creatures. Case in point, Thriving Rhino is one of those good creatures, but also the black gives you that removal spell, and also some other good creatures in black as well. So I'm not surprised it's that popular, but I think we're going to see a lot of it.
Subtle Strike doing good work there, making Picata Pillarbug a little larger while taking out Nightbridge Patrol.
Yeah, not a fantastic card in the sealed format, just the 1 toughness. And the ability is just so weird, right?
Yeah.
That, like, you have a blocking ability on a creature with 1 toughness.
Yeah, Night Market Guard at 3/1. Sometimes it will double block, but I mean, there are lots of permutations where that doesn't really go so well.
Yeah, but sometimes you really need an artifact, and we saw Antonio actually played last turn, played a Reverse Engineer, and it just helps that you have a lot of artifacts that can make your cards cheaper. And I think this is the Cogwork Assembler from Hannes Karem.
I like the Assembler, and it's one of the cards that lets you do things with your mana in the mid to late game. He's not quite up to the mana to be able to activate it just yet, but as and when he does start creating tokens that are copies of artifacts, it can be a potent play.
Yeah, and a 3-mana 2/3. I just talked about it. Like decent numbers on cheap artifact creatures are important for your improvise and for your other effects. Even being able to copy artifacts with this one is extra sweet. And if it gets really into a really long game, you can copy a Prakata Pillar Bug, give it lifelink, gain some life back while swinging. It's certainly not bad.
It's not going to hurt. Either Swooper currently sat unanswered as a flying attacker for Antonio Del Moral Leon, but on 8 life he needs to consider his blocks also. At some point he could cash in that unbridled growth for a card. For now it's just sitting there.
I mean, he has plenty of cards. He drew 3 in the previous turn. It just the question is if they're good enough to turn around the game. Usually in 3 colors, you get more options, more powerful cards at the expense of some consistency. But I would imagine Antonio has something going on here, and he can always cash the unbridled growth for an extra card. Small lull in action here. Antonio has to carefully decide his options, but I think Hannes still has 3 cards, and he has not played land for 2 turns either. So his hand is 3 spells, very likely. So Antonio has to be counting on that as well.
And Del Moral Leon there, cashing in some energy to get an extra servo with his attacks there. Ether Swooper, one of the Ether cycle that realistically can keep attacking quite a bit just because of that flying.
More improvised action here. Bastion Inventor.
Yeah, I like this one. It's against the heavy removal decks, hexproof, very relevant, and a 4/4 body, pretty solid.
Yeah, it's actually I thought the improvised cards were always a little bit underrated, but in the sense that sometimes it's just really hard to get a sealed pool that can make these improvised cards work. But overall, like if you do get the cards, like these become even that much better. We've seen Enraged Giant do some huge beating in general. At least in my pre-release, I did. So and on Magic Online. So I'm not surprised that Antonio's running it. 4/4 hexproof against a big board of smaller creatures is nice.
Yeah, I mean, this is not constructed. We're not expecting our improvised cards to cost 1 or 2, but if you can even just shave 1 or 2 points off the cost of any of them, they go to be really quite efficient.
Yeah, and another thing that I want to point out, look at this, look at what Antonio did. He tapped 2 servos to cast the Bastion and force it to keep up 4 mana. And if I was Hannes Krem, I'd be, alarms would be ringing here loud and clear, but there's no answer to that the 4 mana removal spell from Hannes Krem.
But we are going to get a chance to jump back to our main match now. We will be able to see whether or not Paulo Vitor Damarosa can get the repeat on game 1. He does not have a turn 2 Steel Overseer, but a Prophetic Prism, not a terrible replacement. We know he's got Improvise going on, and mana fixing, card drawing, there's a lot to like. Yeah,
Pacification Array. Again, another card which is great with Improvise, but also does so much more. I think... wait, what happened? Paulo sideboarded. Look, he doesn't have any red.
I mean,
yet.
You had said actually in game 1 that Paulo knew that he was solid blue and artifacts and that the other color was a bit of a movable feast. It may be that he looked on at the green-black deck of Zimmerman and thought, I'd rather have unconditional removal that can deal with the big creatures that you sometimes see in green rather than what's in my red decks.
Yeah, and Foundry Hornet from Martin Zimmerman, and then animating a mobile garrison, but Paulo, Shielded Ether Thief, blocks the garrison and nets him an energy and a nice blocker as well. I like the flash on the Shielded Ether Thief.
Yeah, it's one of those cards that often flash creatures. We talk about them ambushing in terms of actually being able to kill off creatures on attacks. The Ether Thief's not going to do that, but what it will do potentially is draw a few cards.
Look at this, Paulo. Another pacification array, and I like its role in decks like these. Look, in the early turns, you use them to accelerate your improvised cards, but in late game, they just take over, and they're so good against vehicles. Like you'd see in just in Kaladesh, there were not that many tappers, because like you wanted to showcase the vehicles, right? But now that they printed the array, it's so good on this board. It's great. And
Foundry Assembler, a pretty solid body, especially when you get to cast it with Improvise, so you're not having to use up quite as much mana.
Just a pass from Martin Zimmerman. He's down to 3 cards. I think I saw Rush of Vitality in his hand, so that he might be planning on playing that. There's an implement of improvisation from Paulo, just further assembling his board, and I think he just wants to get there. Lots of mana for the arrays to tap down the board, and then draw some cards, play some big dudes. He's in great shape.
Yeah, Paulo Vitor Damarosa here, showing us the power of Improvise. We haven't seen too many improvised threats from him, but those that have come down very, very cheaply.
Yeah. I wonder what Martin Zimmerman will have to say about that.
So, Pacification Array does tap down the Hornet. There are some Thriving Rats, a couple of energy for Martin Zimmerman.
Yeah, not the best. Like Martin's cards are okay, but they just seem very unimpressive against this type of board from Paulo.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of talk about the real power of decks in this Aether Revolt Kaladesh Sealed being based around synergy, and if you want to talk about synergy, that's what Paulo's deck seems to have going on in spades.
Yeah. Now I see a good reason to be black. Weaponcraft Enthusiast in Paulo's hand. Very good with Steel Overseer, right? Turn 2 Steel Overseer, turn 3, make 2 servos, pump up your team. But overall, just a good card on its own. So another great way for improvised cards. I mean, we've only seen the Foundry Assembler from Paulo, but I assume that he probably has a couple more improvised cards. Oh, we also saw the Windkin Raiders.
It's true, yeah. There's definitely a top side on Paulo Vitor Damarosa's improvise options, but I believe that he's also got, I think I can see an Aetherscroll Ancient in hand there for him. If you're looking for big things to do later in the game, he's not quite at the 7 mana that he would need, but for now, in dominant position here in this game.
Yeah, he's still a couple of lands away, but I think I see a Die Young in his hand, a Weldfast Monitor. I think he's just thinking of how do I best deploy my threats. because he also has to think about using the arrays there that he has 2 of in play already. So
On 20 life, though, there's an embarrassment of riches for
Of
Paolo
course,
Vittor
yes,
Dama
of
Rosa. He can
course.
afford to get something else in play, and even though this world-fast monitor is not going to get given Menace anytime soon, it's still an efficient creature.
he has Prison. That's why I love Prophetic Prison, man. It was already good in triple Kaladesh, but now like you can do so many cool decks. You know, we saw Unbridled Growth as one of the cards in you said Renegade map. It just allowed you for all these fancy decks, and Prison does so much though because of Improvise. They fit into different decks, but Prophetic Prison, just drawing card and just having all the mana right as needed is great. Oh, Lifecraft Cavalry from Martin Zimmerman. That's a card I really like, but unfortunately no Revolt.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because as a 5-mana 4/4 trampler, it's already pretty efficient, and we saw there Zimmerman not shy about playing it out without the Revolt. I think that there's a lot of players that do get tempted to hold on to it to try and get those 2 extra +1/+1 counters.
Yeah, and the thing is that Lifecraft Cavalry costing 5, it makes it that much easier to get you to make it into a 6/6 in the late game, whereas some of the cheaper Revolt cards, they're much harder to make work.
So we see Dai Young dealing with the Hornet in play for Martin Zimmerman. He now no longer has any flyers.
And now Paolo will get to work with those arrays. Having 4 mana up and 2 of the tap artifacts is going to make it really hard for Martin Zimmerman to win. He's finally started to draw lands, but yeah, this type of card is actually not that useful.
Yeah, Implement of Ferocity there. It does draw another card for Martin Zimmerman. I guess that now means that those rats at least can jump in a car.
For a very short while only, because I think if Paolo wanted to, he can just tap down both of the creatures. It depends if Martin plays another guy here, but it looks like he passed the turn. I think Paolo's going to tap the rats, tap the cavalry, and start swinging with his team. As I said, the arrays are really good against Mobile Garrison. Okay, so he's just going to leave up the rats.
If he wants to start getting aggressive, he can always tap down the rats too, but I don't think that there's any great need for Paolo here. You can see there are lots of ways of telling which player is winning a game of Magic.
Yeah.
One easy one is who's got the most stuff. And right now, that's very much Paolo Vittor Dama Rosa.
Yeah, he has 4 cards. I think, yeah, he's going to have that 7th land, and he could just jam the Ancient if he wanted to. He also has the Weaponcraft Enthusiast still in hand, and I think I saw one more card.
And Shielded Ether Thief with that big Leviathan, he could just use it to draw lots of extra cards every turn.
Yeah.
Don't necessarily need to bounce the entire board.
Well, you know I like value, so I certainly wouldn't mind if Paolo started popping off with some good stuff here. So.
And boom, there it is. We've been talking about it for a little while there. Ether Squall Ancient coming down. It's a gigantic flyer.
Okay, that
Step 1.
sold. Yeah.
we don't need anything else for it to be
No.
good. But as it turns out, it does do quite a lot of extra things too. Giving you 3 energy at the beginning of your upkeep. That can potentially be used by Paolo Vittor Dama Rosa to draw extra cards. Alternatively, he could let that energy build up, and if he gets up to 8 energy, he can pay it all to return all other creatures to their owner's hands.
Yeah, I mean, we saw he has some uses of energy in his deck, so I wouldn't be surprised if he has a couple of more, and he can put them to good use. But as we said, 7 mana, 6/6 is just huge on this board. And look at this, an attack with the Lifecraft Cavalry from Martin Zimmerman.
Suspicious.
Very suspicious, and Paolo is just putting everything in front of it. It seems like he wants that extra energy from the Shielded Ether Thief, but I assume Martin has a trick again. And yeah, he has the Rush of Vitality that we talked about. It's actually not bad. He can kill off the both artifact creatures from the board. Paolo's tapped out.
Now, this particular sort of situation, I can see it coming up quite a bit with Ether Revolt, because now there are additional incentives to attack. With Revolt as an extra thing, sometimes suspicious-looking attacks, i.e. attacks where it looks like you could just sort of lose out, become a little bit more interesting. Rush of Vitality here doing great work for Martin Zimmerman.
Yeah. So he kills the 2 artifact creatures, gains a bunch of life back. I think Paolo went for this block because he thought, well, if Martin has a trick to make this a really bad trade, then he's probably not killing my Ether Squall Ancient, or maybe if he's developing his board, it's not going to be that problematic. So now that Martin did not kill Ether Squall Ancient, Paolo has to think that Martin actually doesn't have anything to deal with it in his hand, and Paolo will just need to hold on in this game overall, and his pacification areas will do a great job of that, especially against this board.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that set of blocks from Paolo said, yes, I do smell a trick, but I don't want to throw away my best card to it. I want to force you to use it on weaker cards.
Yeah, pretty much. And it was fine to use in this spot. I mean, he was tapped out, but he also won't be representing many tricks in the next couple of turns. So here's the Enthusiast with a couple of servos, and he's going to leave up 4 mana for the arrays. I think looks like Martin actually has a Prey Upon, and I remember the first printing of Prey Upon, and when it first happened a long time ago, and everyone was like, "Oh, this is a great card," because we weren't used to the green fight card. Yeah, there was one of the, I think it was the first one actually.
It was. I think it was in Innistrad to begin with.
Yeah, and so everyone was really excited about. But I think over the years, and as it has been printed a few times, people have realized like, okay, it's good, but it's not always that great. And this is one of the spots. If your opponent has a bigger creature that you need to get rid of, it's actually not that great.
Yeah, generally speaking, green likes to have the biggest creature on the battlefield, at which point Prey Upon becomes fantastic. Right now, though, Palavitor Dama de Rosa holds that title. Some big attacks coming in here, and Zimmerman making the most of his opportunity to pump those thriving rats. It doesn't seem to be something he's been able to achieve very often here.
Yeah, and as you said, embarrassment riches is right. I mean, Paolo's still at 18 life, and now he's going to actually hit that 8 energy threshold for the Ether Squall Ancient, if he wanted to, of course. Which I don't think is going to be that case, because that would mean his servos will be gone forever. Or he's still in fine shape, and he's even left up 2 mana for shenanigans with that pacification array. Yeah.
Well, here's another Prey Upon.
Yeah.
And Paolo says, well, if Prey Upon's going to come along, I'm at least going to draw a card out of it.
I mean, we were wondering, like, okay, he could bounce his whole hand, but yeah, actually pay 3 mana with the Ether Shield, pay 3 energy rather to draw a card is also fairly nice. But the thing is, this card is so good in big energy decks, but sometimes when you just have this like a defensive creature, it doesn't really come up that often. So it's nice to see Paolo finding good use, and his control deck is churning along nicely.
Yeah, the Ether Thief on its own struggles to generate too much energy, but it's a fantastic way of spending energy. And actually, in Ether Revolt, good ways of spending energy are a little bit harder to find.
Yeah, exactly. And Daring Demolition from Paolo, taking care of the Lightcrack Cavalry. And I mean, Martin finally drew a removal spell for the Ancient. I'm just wondering if it's not too late, because Paolo just had so many more extra cards.
I mean, how must it feel if you're Zimmerman in this game? In game 1, he kind of got overrun by a very aggressive red-blue improvised deck sporting an invention. Game 2, he's playing against a very powerful blue deck, but it feels like a very different blue deck. This is a more controlling option. Daring Demolition coming from him. At least he deals with that Etherborn Ancient, but at this point it might be too late.
Yeah, I like how he kept up 2 mana, learning from the first game about Revolutionary Rebuff. I mean, he probably didn't have anything else to play anyway, but it's just cute to see that he recognizes this, and board got a little better. But Paolo, remember, like, his board doesn't look that great right now, but he had so many more cards from his past few turns that he's just going to start unloading. And Shipwreck Moray is the first one.
Yeah, Shipwreck Moray, another card that generates a lot of energy when it comes into play. A full 4 energy coming along there for the 0/5, and if it can attack through, which with those pacification arrays it probably can, it can attack for a lot.
Yeah, and look, Martin's down to 6. Like those attacks with the Ancient over the previous turns really took a toll on Martin's life total, who only has a land and a spell in his hand. Probably not something great. I can't really see what it is.
Step 1, tap down your team.
Yeah.
Step 2, we don't even need to get to step 3 for profit here for Paolo at this point. It's a very simple program.
Yeah.
One that he's been repeating for a little while now to great effect.
Yeah, I like this. I like both his decks. The blue-red like hyper improvised artifact-based deck look great. Oh, okay. Natural
Obsolescence.
Obsolescence. Thank you. It really pays to have a proper English-speaking person in the booth here.
I do what I can where I can. Putting artifacts on the bottom of owner's library, potentially kind of a useful ability here and there. There are some artifacts that you don't want to go to the graveyard, either because of triggers or because they might come back. And this is certainly a way of getting rid of them, probably more permanently.
Yeah, but Paolo, again, found another good artifact creature, the blue automaton, being able to start scrying through his deck. Yeah, and look at that, Martin just showing, yeah, I got a land and a takedown in my hand. It's not going to be enough.
So a relatively straightforward first round for Paolo Vitor Damarosa. He goes to 4-0 here at Grand Prix Prague. But plenty more magic here to be able to show you elsewhere.
Yeah, I think Paolo is very good. His decks are very well set up for kind of like a mini meta game. His decks seem really good against green-black.
Yeah,
especially his blue-black deck. It can be slow enough to stem the bleeding, but it also has the powerful bombs and removal spells to take care of what the opponent is doing. So I'm not surprised he sideboarded into that sort of setup, because I think the red cards are weaker in that matchup against green compared to the black cards.
Yeah, even if you just look at Daring Demolition, that's a card that says no to virtually every threat in the format. And yes, you might have some red removal, but most red removal will struggle against big green creatures. But we're going to get a chance to jump across and see how things are going here for Hannes Karem against Antonio Del Moral Leon. Hannes Karem picked up the first game and looks to have a fairly exciting board here. He's got that Hydra in play and energy to use with it. And immediately there with a big play in terms of heroic intervention to give his entire team indestructible and hexproof. That not the sort of card that Antonio Del Moral Leon wants to see in a close race.
Yeah, it's the card doesn't look that impressive because it doesn't really pump any of your creatures, but actually it makes those big combats really safe. And hexproof and indestructible is a very good combination. It is basically a catch-all for a lot of spots.
It's not just the blue decks that get to feel safe with their instants in hand anymore.
Exactly. Yeah, but Bristling Hydra is nice rare to have from Hannes Karem, especially being up a game. 5 energy. Speaking of hexproof, right? Okay.
Some big blocks here.
Okay, just pillar bugging it up.
It looks like Yeheni's expertise is sat in Hannes Karem's hand here.
Not that great on this board. Oh, but Appetite for the Unnatural on a servo token.
I'm going to gain some life. I'm going to win this combat. This seems a happy place for him to be.
Yeah, the problem for Antonio is that his fire plan would be nice and dandy, but dealing with a 4/5 lifelinker should be his priority. And it looks like it's actually going to be a big problem. He's down to 1 card in hand, and he's probably going to have to throw a lot of cards in front of that pillar bug.
Yeah, Druid of the Cowl getting stuck in a little bit unusual, but Hannes Karem getting away with it there.
Antonio's down to 4. I think Hannes with cards in hand, he's okay. Does he? Ooh, there's Yeheni's expertise. Boom. Yep.
And there's even a spell to cast off it, and there's the handshake. Hannes Karem taking it down there.
Yeah, I like this. Hannes was unloading the last card from his hand. Antonio was already reaching, but then well, I don't need to see the rest.
Yeah, Antonio was ready to throw his hand on the table regardless because he could see that game was well and truly over. So another quick 2-0 victory in our feature match area.
Yeah, thick and fast.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm interested to see how the colors end up shaking out over the course of today. Of course, tomorrow we will be moving to draft, but for now we're on sealed deck all day. We're going to get a chance to show you a little bit more magic from our feature match area and our time walk matches right after these messages. Hello and welcome back. Tim Willoughby here in the booth with Matej Big Z Zadelkai. It's round 4 here at Grand Prix Prague. We've already seen 2 great matches from 2 Pro Tour champions, but plenty more action in the feature match area, and we're going to get a chance to jump across and see a little bit of our time walk matches. So let's head down to the feature match area for just a little bit more magic. So on the left-hand side of our screen here, we can see that we've got Jason Chung, New Zealand player, current gold level pro and a member of Team MTG Mint Card. He's up against Yaroslav Bucek.
Close enough. Bocek.
Oh, so close.
Yeah, I actually have a story with Yaroslav. My first foreign tournament, the first time that I traveled outside of my country to visit a tournament, I actually met Yaroslav. So he's been playing for 15 years at least. It's a long time.
The old timers match.
Yeah, pretty. Actually, it's longer now. It's 2017 already, and that's scary. But yeah, but let's go back to the actual magic there and the Ether Poisoner from Jason. I wonder with Yaroslav. Jason actually with an interesting color combination, white and black, something that actually I haven't seen. I barely seen at all. And Yaroslav going with that
Metallic Mimic.
Yeah. Funny thing, we should really call Yaroslav Bocek JB because that's what actually people call him.
Very well, I can live with this because I'm pretty sure I can pronounce it that way around. But Metallic Mimic coming into play, it will mean that one creature type of his choice comes into play with +1/+1 counters. We will find out soon enough, I'm sure, what creature type that is as he plays some more creatures. Jason Chung taking the opportunity to get a hit in with his Ether Poisoner, gets a token out of it, spends his energy to do so. At some point fairly soon, I wouldn't be surprised to see the Poisoner hang back and make the most of its Death Touch.
There we go.
Well, Ether Poisoner coming along for JB, and he gets a +1/+1 counter on it. By that, I would assume that Metallic Mimic is currently a human.
Maybe it's an artificer. Maybe he said artificer, but I assume he probably went with human. There's actually plenty of humans in black, and we don't know what his second card is. I think it's red. I think I saw some red cards, but Daring Demolition taking care of that.
And Jason Chung getting stuck in here, unafraid of any blocks from the other side of the table.
Yeah, but it's just a bunch of 1/1s, and now JB can swing backward to himself. If he found some red mana, maybe just no. Okay, Night Market Guard, good enough.
I mean, the guard can block both of these creatures and trade with them both.
Oh yeah, that's one of the upsides of having a 3/1 creature that can block an additional. He can at least get to deal more damage to the creature he blocks. So.
Yeah, it's a little complicated, the being able to block 2 creatures. It's quite an unusual ability.
Yeah.
I sometimes refer to it as double blocking, which I can understand gets a bit confusing again. But yeah, this is a 3/1, which is obviously good on offense and sometimes all right on defense too.
Yeah, but Jason can always just attack with 1 creature, but has to be a little careful about what JB can unload. I'm looking at JB's hand. I saw a Noxious Gearhulk sitting in his hands. He wants to get those lands stat.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've already seen him miss multiple land drops, and that probably the easiest way to lose games of Magic.
Oh yeah. Well, Jason gonna just attack with 1 into the guard. That's a good one. Didn't do much, but Midnight Oil. Whew.
We've got ourselves a reader, and I can understand why. It starts there with 7 counters, loses counters comparatively quickly to a turn, and eventually that Midnight Oil, while it will lower his hand size, in the meantime will help him draw a lot of extra cards.
Yeah, the funny thing is when the card first came out, people thought that like once you run out of counters, you stop drawing 2 cards, like the extra card, but it's actually not the case. You just keep drawing the extra card always.
Like, yes,
you still have no hand size.
Your hand size becomes 0, which means you're going to have to discard at the end of turn, and yes, you're going to take points of damage or you're going to lose life when you have to discard. But in the meantime, it just gets you so much extra action. So 2 cards coming at the start of turn for Jason Chung. And with 5 lands and what looks to be a fairly aggressive deck, I'm guessing he's going to be able to deploy these pretty briskly.
Yeah. His deck seems fairly cheap. And 2 creatures, Dun Operative and an Audacious Infiltrator. And with JB, there's his red. Can he get back into this game? But I mean, look, Jason had a great draw in the regard that he had a bunch of relatively cheap cards. He might have mulliganed because it didn't seem like he had too many cards. But now having the Midnight allows him to refuel and just go for the kill soon enough. Yeah, Ether Chase is a good one, and it's a is it a human?
It is a human. It's a human artificer.
Right, so it worked again with Ether Poisoner. Both are human artificers.
Has first strike, which is pretty relevant on this board.
Yeah, especially as a 3/2 first strike. Might be a problem for Jason, but I think Jason had another Daring Demolition that he can use to take care of the Ether Chaser here. While still not being forced to discard the cards to that Midnight Owl.
Yeah, currently his maximum hand size is 3. And he's racing to kill off his opponent before that becomes too relevant.
Big trade. Take 4 still. So now Jason is putting on the damage. 2 creatures on the board against 0, but we know that JB is going to start unloading soon. We know he's working his way up towards the Noxious Gearhulk. Ambitious Aetherborn, another good creature.
Going to bring a servo along with it, thanks to Fabricate.
This was actually an interesting decision because the problem here is the Aetherborn can only trade with the Infiltrator, but the Infiltrator cannot be blocked by the servo. So he could have thought about making actually a 5/4, which is better against the 2 creatures that Jason has. But this mitigates the risk a little bit against removal spells, pump spells.
I mean, JB is just desperately hoping that he can continue the streak of lands. He's drawn a couple of lands on the bounce now, and we can see that his draw getting a lot better now. He can actually deploy cards, and if Noxious Gearhulk comes along, well, that could be a very big deal.
Well, we'll see what Jason can do. I think I saw Revoke Privileges, and I may be a Propeller Pioneer, so I think he can deploy both cards without actually discarding. But I wasn't sure on the second one. I wouldn't bet on it, so I think he's just going to play the pacifism version. Oh, it's actually an aerial modification.
So privileges on that Ambitious Aetherborn revoked. No longer able to do a whole lot of blocking. Just a trade there between those 2 servos. JB taking a hit.
And Jason has to discard because he has 2 cards and he only has his maximum hand size is 1. But he's saving up that aerial modification, so maybe next turn he will have a 5/3 Infiltrator.
Yeah, I mean, next turn he will have to start playing cards in his hand. He can't hold on to anything. His maximum hand size will be 0, at which point he'll be playing the best version of Danish Magic available, where you're drawing 2 cards a turn.
But he won't get to do anything with that aerial modification just yet, as JB deals with the creature.
Yeah, Chandra's Revolution, killing off the creature, tapping down that swamp. It's not going to untap. And maximum hand size is now 0.
Yes.
Yaroslav now having another read of Midnight Oil. And as it turns out, Jason Chung drawing a lot of lands, which is not really where he wants to be at this point.
Yeah, funnily enough, he'll get to play land, but he has no... I think Jason's going to play the aerial modification on the Ambitious Aetherborn just so that he doesn't have to discard it to lose life.
Yeah, it's better than taking a point of damage.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it doesn't say you have to enchant something of yours. That's sweet. He takes 1 from because he had to discard the land there. He can only play 1 in turn. That's a sweet play.
So Jason Chung living off the top. Yaroslav Bocek finally getting a little bit going here. Getting to deploy 2 threats in the same turn is good, and they both have Menace, so it's going to be a problem for Jason Chung to get any blocking on here. Yeah,
especially with the Noxious Gearhulk mana now being red. Look, it's JB's last card in his hand. Ooh, Augmenting Automaton.
With a lot of mana in play. That's 8 lands left over, so it can potentially pump itself up to being a 5/5 on any given turn. But with Menace, the best it's going to be able to do is block a monkey right now.
Yeah, actually JB is just taking the opportunity. He could kill the automaton before attacking, but he will only gain 1 life because Jason wouldn't pump it, of course. And now he'll block them. He'll try to block the monkey. Oh, okay. No, JB actually drew another Chandra's Revolution, so he'll just kill it and before blockers. Yeah, in response to the pumping, it looks like.
No, that would have to have been after combat because it is a sorcery.
Probably, yeah, it is a sorcery. Yeah, right. It just looked the way he played it that he was doing it as an instant. But they're both just fast players. You're right. Okay.
Aetherborn Rock, that's a big one. Gets him some energy now and potentially lots more energy later. And, well, if you're looking for vehicles, this is one of the bigger ones in the format. That is the Iron Tread Crusher.
Yeah.
6/6, crew 3. Noxious Gearhulk says, well, if you're going to crew now or never.
Yep.
But conveniently, all that menace again means that JB will be able to get in a happy amount of damage here on attacks. Yes, that monkey. I mean, these monkeys.
The cannon fodder.
It says on Karizev that the monkeys are getting exiled at the end of turn.
Yeah.
Not relevant thus far.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen Dragon Father. I think they should print a Monkey Father with a bunch of 2-1 monkeys being thrown. Yeah, but so it's going to be pretty nice. Putting Jason down to 6, and the Gearhulk also has Menace conveniently. And again, vehicles are not that good against this particular what we call like mechanic in Menace, just because you're forced to tap down some creatures. And Jason Chung has been drawing 2 cards the whole game, and
yeah, I think he cast Midnight Oil more or less on turn 4.
it was like turn 5, yeah, but still, he was just kept drawing card after card. But I just think they line up really poorly. He just drew a glut of lands at the same time, and the aerial modification was a little too late. So,
I mean, if he'd been able to put together the aerial modification with, for example, that Iron Tread Crusher on the battlefield, he would have been in fantastic shape. But not to be. As things stand, though, we see that he's now found another one of his rares there in
Midnight Entourage, I think.
That's the one, yeah. It's going to pump all of his other Etherborn. Not that there are any others on the battlefield right now.
Yeah, no.
But at least he has multiple creatures, so there are. He has the potential to block one non-monkey creature this turn.
Non-monkey creature, I like it.
I mean, he can always block the monkey.
Yeah, of course.
Though that would be bold right now.
I mean, he can only block one creature, and I assume it's going to be the Gearhulk. Yeah. Motions for the monkey. There it is. I love that picture. It's awesome. It's just a monkey sitting. And Jason just packs it up. The problem was that he would have to double block the Noxious Gearhulk because it was dealing the most damage, and if he had decided to spread his blockers, he really couldn't, because there were 3 menace creatures on the board, and the monkey damage, I think that was just the finisher. Like
Ragavan, the legendary monkey.
Ragavan.
That's his name. Finally gets through, and we're on to game 2 here between
that was fast.
Yaroslav Bocek and Jason Chung. Jason Chung looking to find a way of getting back in things. I mean, when we stop and think about how that game played out, for a lot of that game, Bocek was like having trouble finding the lands he needed.
But the power level of his cards were pretty good on its own, whereas Jason's, I mean, we saw 2 augmenting automatons, which are like fine. Like, we were in a long game, but he had double daring demolition. Everything was fine, but just JB's cards just seemed to be more powerful on their own.
So Metallic Mimic again coming down early for Bocek.
Down to operative for Jason there. Just a 2/2 for now. I think we're just gonna have some more action here with that Metallic Mimic.
Yeah, Ether Chaser immediately putting a +1/+1 counter on it because it is on the Mimic's team. And 3 power first strike is problematic.
And I love Ether Chaser. I mean, I'm fine with it being a 2/1 first strike, because for 2 mana that's incredible value, and you also get to get the servo token most of the time, which is just great. But speaking of great, Jason Chung has one of my favorite cards in his hand, and he's slow rolling it a little bit here. He goes for the Iron Tread Crusher, but I think I saw an Untethered Express in his hand too.
Oh, the Murder Train. There's so many fantastic vehicles for Jason Chung, but he knows that the Iron Tread Crusher has been seen by Bocek in game 1, so maybe he wants to sort of hold things out a little bit here.
Yeah, I mean, you would think Renegade Trader was a scary train, but wait until you play against Untethered Express.
Yeah, Untethered Express, I feel like it's one Thesaurus entry away from being a Renegade Freighter, as it turns out just a little bit larger. Ether Poisoner here coming from Yaroslav Bocek. That one, a great blocker for even the biggest of vehicles, and also getting a +1/+1 counter.
Yeah, it's like JB has the same draw as he had in the previous game, but this time he actually has both colors of mana fairly early, so but the cards seem to be identical, and he has the Noxious Gearhulk in his hand too.
Oh, this could be carnage.
Yeah. And Jason seems like he's on that vehicle aerial modification plan.
I like it. Aerial modification, if you're looking for creatures to hit, it does it all. Yes, it costs a lot of mana. 5 mana is not cheap, but +2/+2, flying, and permacrew.
Jason, come on, do it. 8/8 Crusher.
There we go.
There we go. Boom. Take 8, JB. I love it. I mean, I expected. I was hoping to see something with siege modification. Played on some nasty vehicles. This is good for me.
Yeah, now we have a race on our hands, and it's not a race that Bocek's necessarily winning, though if he can get up to Noxious Gearhulk Manor without simply being dead, he's going to gain a lot of that life back.
No, we'll see. I don't think he has a 5th land in his hand, so he's not on course to get to 6 on turn 6. Because he might actually be close to dying here. And Jason already trading away his creatures. I mean, I know who's winning this race so far, but let's see what JB plays here.
Yeah. Big turn here for JB. He gets to get back a creature, but that not necessarily going to be enough for him, really. Draws a card because he has got an artifact in play.
Yeah.
And there is the land. So,
okay,
Noxious Gearhulk plan still live.
Yep.
But it's going to be in the nick of time if it comes along.
Yeah. I kind of like the resourceful return, but I know a lot of people just leave it in the sideboard. Maybe bring it back for matchups where there's a lot of trading, and this matchup doesn't seem to be going that way just yet. Boom! Another swing for 8 from Jason.
Get crushed.
Indeed. What's next?
There are thems that would argue there doesn't need to be much next, but Jason Chung pondering his options here. He's got a lot of mana, he might as well spend it.
Midnight Entourage, maybe?
The boys are back.
I love that show. The movie was okay too.
Jason Chung just thinking about his options here. At least if he keeps mana up, he can represent some removal, but no, the Midnight Entourage does come down. Remember, even if it itself dies, he will get to draw a card.
Oh, man, he just drew the 6th land off the top and immediately went for it with Noxious Gearhulk. No hesitation. Gains back 8, and now he's in the driver's seat again.
JB just went from 0 to hero with that 6th land, kills off the one big threat that Jason Chung had going on, and each of these attackers will happily trade with Midnight Entourage, or indeed simply take a chunk out of Jason Chung's life total.
That's brutal. I really want Jason to get there. I think it would have made his day.
There's a lot still needs to happen for Jason's day to be made here. We're still in the early stages of this GP. Round 4, Jason Chung on his first round after his 3 buys. Looks like he might be struggling in order to get out of this one with the W.
Yeah, and I like how his board is also growing with every turn, like all those servos from the Chaser and the Poisoner just adding up, and just Jason falling behind more and more with every turn. And this was brutal. Hey, JB really had to play the resourceful return just to draw the card, just so he could draw the 5th land, and to put himself in a position to draw that 6th land for the Gearhulk.
Yeah, you play to your outs. At least he only needed to find land rather than finding the Gearhulk itself. Jason Chung loses his 1 remaining Midnight Entourage. Just does get to draw a card as the sort of parting gift, albeit at the cost of a point of life.
And that's actually a problem. Like, he has no board against 6 creatures. One of them being a 5/4 menace, another one being a 3/2 first strike. Okay, daring demolition, but that costs 4. Not very efficient. And he doesn't even play a 6th land here. Yeah, with many cards in his hand.
So this hit not lethal, but it will leave him teetering on the brink, Jason Chung, as he takes presumably another 6, 7, 8 points.
Yeah.
No tricks there from Jason Chung. Not too many 1-mana tricks in Aether Revolt full stop, and certainly not in white.
Yeah.
And for JB here, I mean, do you even want to commit much more to the board?
I mean, if it's like a vehicle, yeah. I mean, vehicle's fine, but I wouldn't play the Gifted Aetherborn. I would be scared of a Fumigate or something similar, but yeah.
As things stand, though, JB not punished there for extending as wildly as he did. That enough to pick up another 2-0 victory. We've seen 3 different 2-0 victories here in round 4 at Grand Prix Prague. Myself, Tim Willoughby, back with Matej, Big Z, Zadelkai, and aggression kind of winning out there.
Yeah.
We did not see too much in the way of control beyond a really interesting pivot from Paulo Vitor Damaderosa. I'm really intrigued to see how much of that ends up being a consistent play that he makes for game 2 and 3 across the rounds, because we do sometimes see that players build their sealed deck and then kind of come to a moment of realization at some point after maybe testing out a little bit that actually games 2 and 3 I'm going to play the build that I should have played, or if he's just going to say, I got options.
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of players, sideboarding actually, it's not something they actively think about in a sealed deck GP, and they usually just want to build their one deck and maybe like, I'm going to board this one card, this one card. Paulo actually has an entirely second plan, and I think he's going to do well on day 1, and I will follow him throughout.
And we will, of course, follow both him and a whole host of other players that are here at this GP, because this is the GP right the weekend before the Pro Tour. It's the first Premier level event with Ether Revolt, and there are a lot of players who travelled maybe a little bit further than they normally would in order to get to Prague, in order to get some reps in with these new cards. We'll get a chance to see a whole host of Hall of Famers, Pro Tour champions, the works here in Prague, as the players battle out today in sealed deck, but tomorrow in draft to try and pick up a trophy ahead of the Pro Tour in Dublin.
Yeah, and I mean, it's